It's the moms of this nation, single, married, widowed, who really hold this country together. We're the mothers. We're the wives. We're the grandmothers. We're the big sisters. We're the little sisters, and we are the daughters. You know it's true, don't you? We're too smart to know there aren't easy answers, but we're not dumb enough to accept that there aren't better answers.
You see, Mr. President, real leaders don't follow polls. Real leaders change polls.
All right, a few highlights from last night, everyone, from both the soft sell and the hard sell, Ann Romney and Christie, respectively. And we got mixed reactions on how they did last night, and we're going to get to that. In fact, right now, I want to turn to our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman, live from Tampa with more. Andrew?
Yeah, Rich, lots of questions about Christie and his performance last night. And, certainly the talk about whether this was an effective surrogate for Mitt Romney or whether he was being a surrogate for Christie. For a little bit of that, I turned to somebody who knows about being in the spotlight in these sorts of situations, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Here's what he said.
I thought they both played the role they were assigned. I think Ann Romney did an absolutely great job of describing the personal side of her husband, the parts that maybe Mitt Romney is more reluctant because he's a humble person, because of his upbringing, he's more reluctant to brag about himself. Or I thought she accomplished that for him. She sort of we got to understand why Mitt Romney might be more reluctant to talk about the good things that he's done. It comes from his personal background, his religious background. And then I think Chris did a great job of laying out the philosophical distinction between the Obama people on the one hand and what Romney and Paul Ryan want to do. And I think talking about his achievements as governor was necessary to describe that it can be done. President Obama is whining all the time about things he can't do. I can't do it. He hasn't passed a budget in 4 years. I mean, it's crazy. So he said, it's because of the Republicans. Well, the president leaves out the fact that he had a Democratic Congress for 2 years and still couldn't pass a budget. He couldn't work with a Democratic Congress. He couldn't work with a Republican Congress. Christie was able to accomplish this as a Republican in a Democratic state. So I think that was necessary to lay the groundwork to the fact that this can be done. If it can be done in New Jersey, we can do it in Washington.
Christie, just one of the subjects that I spoke about with a guy who's got a great job title, ABC senior political correspondent, Jonathan Karl. We also talked about Ann Romney's address last night and how the impact or how the convention is spinning for Mitt Romney, whether it's going to move the needle and move the polls any in his direction. Here's my extended conversation with Jonathan Karl. Your thoughts about last night, Ann Romney's speech, Christie's speech?
What was remarkable to me about Ann Romney's speech is that this is a woman who has almost never given a prepared speech before in her life, let alone something on a stage remotely like this. I believe, has never even spoken except for brief introductory remarks off a teleprompter before, and she seemed incredibly natural up there. And it was a moving speech for many people in this hall. I saw, of course, the Romney sons seemed to be tearing up, and some delegates on the floor. I thought it was a pretty remarkable speech. Christie, the entrance was was one of the most interesting I've ever seen. Coming out just full clapping with everybody, and gave a speech that seemed to me to be a little bit of a warm-up act for 2016 or 2020, the next time there's an opening.
Was that the thought when it went 16, 17 minutes without mentioning Mitt Romney in his speech last night?
Yeah, Christie certainly went a long time without mentioning Mitt Romney. When he finally got around to mentioning Mitt Romney, it seemed to go by very quickly. It was almost a rushed part of the speech. It seemed to be heavily about Christie, about what he's done in New Jersey, about kind of his approach to politics. The leaders don't follow pollsters, follow the polls. Leaders change the polls. It was very much a Christie-centric speech. Now, the Romney people insist that they were thrilled with his speech. They saw the speech before. They helped draft the speech. So there's a lot of grumbling about, outside you hear people saying, hey, that was not really a pro-Mitt Romney speech. It was a pro-Christie speech. But the Romney campaign said that they knew what he was going to do and they're happy with it.
Now, Paul Ryan, who speaks tonight, certainly has a national profile, but clearly he's never been in a position quite like this before. What do you expect from him, and how critical is his performance tonight to the Romney-Ryan ticket?
I think it's a really important moment for Paul Ryan. He's never remotely had an audience this large. He has done a lot of PowerPoint presentations. He's done a lot of, very specific budget type talks, very high on substance. This is a rally the troops speech. It's a little different than what he's done so much of. I imagine Paul Ryan will rise to the occasion, but he really needs to. This is a big moment. Most of the country has no idea who Paul Ryan is. And more so than any of the other speakers that are speaking in prime time. I mean, this is Paul Ryan's introduction.
I know it's early in the convention. We're one day in. We have 2 more big days and the 2 biggest speakers for the ticket still to come. But do you think they've got the ball rolling in terms of reversing some of these numbers that they need to get, or eating into some of the leads that we've seen in the polls for President Obama?
Well, they've had to battle against a storm for the nation's attention. They don't have, the undivided attention from the nation during a sleepy August. This is, in some cases, not even leading the news stories each night. So it's hard to see if they'll get the full bounce they wanted to get. There is energy in this hall. There's not explosive energy. I mean, I've been at conventions that have been more raucous, but I think that they are off to a pretty good start. It's hard to say. We're just had one of the 3 nights. Obviously, so much rides on what Paul Ryan does, and the biggest speech, obviously, of Mitt Romney's life.
Finally, we've had very conservative movement on the platform. Certainly, we've heard from the Ron Paul crowd yesterday. Meanwhile, the Romney campaign trying to appeal to the middle. How do you think the outreach is going, or appears to be going, towards moderate voters, or those few remaining undecided voters out there?
There are so few undecided voters in this election. Obviously, there's a battle to get the 5 or 6 or 7% of people that have not made up their minds. But this is, I think, more than any election we've seen, certainly in my lifetime, a rally your base election, get your people fired up, make sure they turn out to vote. And I think that, obviously they have to try to somehow do both of those things. What the Republicans have going for them is there is such anger at Barack Obama on the part of conservatives that they will tolerate a little of moving to the middle by their nominee.
Is that enough? Is just anger at the president enough, or do they have to come up with their own set of proposals and try to win over the American public on their own?
Well, anger at the president gets them a long way there. This is, in many ways, a referendum election. That's what Republicans are counting on. But it's not enough. I mean, they have to show that Romney is an acceptable alternative, that he's got an idea. You've heard it, that they have to portray him as the Mr. Fix-It, as the guy that can get in there, fix the economy, get the country back on track, and succeed where Obama has failed. But 90% of this is showing the country that Obama is no longer deserves, that does not deserve to be rehired.
More of my conversation with Rudy Giuliani, as well as a chat with Chris Shays, former congressman, about the role of moderates in today's GOP when we come back from Tampa. But for now, Rich, I'm sending it back to you in the studio.
All right, good enough, Andrew. Thank you very much. Guys, we'll talk about Christie in a little bit. Obviously, a huge figure around here. Ann Romney. Dom, how do you think she did?
I have to be honest with you. She hit a grand slam. She reminded me, it's funny, you did the interview with Rudy Giuliani. It reminded me with what his wife at the time, Donna Hanover, did for Giuliani's image. He was the U.S. attorney. The speculation was that he was too hard-edged to be elected mayor of New York. They put the wife forward. She got the job done. She hit a grand slam. She connected with women. I don't know if it's going to work ultimately, because the bottom line is his record. He can't get away with that. He can't get away from that as it relates to women's issues. But she put Romney for the first time, in my perspective, in a way that we could see him as a regular guy, that he wasn't always rich, that they had an ironing board in their living room. That goes very far.
I hear you on that. But listen, I thought she did good. I think she's extremely likable, and you believe her that there's some substance to it. This isn't just made for TV, that they were a good couple, and that she's someone you trust to watch your kids. You know what I mean? But Tom, she told us about Mitt Romney. She didn't show us about Mitt Romney, and nobody believes, after all the I think tone-deaf efforts to make themselves a hard scrabble, how tough they had it. Their things were so tough they almost had to dip into the 401k, you know what I mean? That, to me, I would have wanted some more anecdotes that would have really humanized Mitt Romney, and she was the best chance to do that. I didn't get that completely. I mean, I thought she did good, Maybe I was expecting even more, but I thought there was more opportunities to humanize than maybe were actualized. What do you think?
You know, I don't disagree with you on that. She did a great job. Listen, she's never read from a teleprompter before.
And
It's very tough, and she was clearly nervous, but she was very endearing in her nervousness.
People were rooting for her.
Yeah, they really were. But she got up there. She was articulate. The whole first section of the speech, where she's talking to women, was designed to beat back the Obama charge that rolls around every 4 years. The Democrats come out, they say if you elect a Republican, they'll declare war on women and they'll set you back into the kitchen, you know, and you're not even going to have the right to vote. But what she did, I think, was very effective in talking directly to women, and then trying to humanize them. You know, the Democrats have spent a lot of time and money trying to paint the Romneys as people who lived up in an ivory tower, and, you know, with her sitting around eating bonbons all day while the servants, you know, wander around the estate. And I thought that the imagery was really good. Them in the basement apartment, the desk made of sawhorses and plywood. And I thought her best line.
People bought it though, because see, I think the Romneys made a mistake of apologizing for success. I think Americans don't begrudge people if they made it. Now, maybe he was born on third base, but Mitt Romney's been successful at what he's done.
But I think that her best line, and I think she made the point very tastefully. She said, you know, I've read a lot of storybooks, but they've never had a chapter about MS and breast cancer. She wanted to send a message to people that, you know what, we've felt hardship. It's maybe not the same hardships that you're feeling right now under this president, but we've had to struggle in ways as well. And I thought she was very credible in doing that.
I think on that one we got unanimity, that she reached people there.
She did a great job, but let's not go too far here. Not many of us own our own horse. I mean, not many of us have elevators in our home.
You weren't in the Olympics for
right? I mean, not many of us can relate to the. I mean, let's not go too far. Not many of us can relate to the lifestyle.
I bet you're both big Kennedy fans, by the way, and they are the ones who lived in the ivory tower, and they also happen to be one of the most corrupt political dynasties in history, and they were patriarchs of the Democratic Party for a very long time.
And the problem for her, how does she get around his record when it relates to abortion, women's rights?
People aren't voting on abortion.
Yeah, but my only point is, and we're going to get to verdict, because I don't think really she had to convince people on social policy. I didn't think that was, I think it was really humanized. But the whole effort to say, trust me, he'll be good for women, I say you could read that two ways. If you're in the room, if you think she's talking to you, that's one thing. But if you think she's talking to the independent, moderate voters out there to say, my guy's not going to roll back choice. But then the party platform is abortion would be prohibited with no exceptions, including rape, incest, health of mother. And then you go down the other lines in terms of what would be cut. I'm saying you could read that two ways, Tom, which is, you're probably right, it doesn't. But it could be one, hey, you know what? Don't worry about what's going on the platform here. My guy's a moderate. He's not going to roll back your rights. Or two, it could be, hey, you know what? Just trust me. The check's in the mail. He won't do anything
Democrats have made this case since Roe v. Wade. When I was on the Bush campaign in 2000, they were leveling the same charges. They were saying Bush will set you back 50 years. The party platform doesn't match.
Compassionate conservative. He didn't have the baggage of the platform that these guys do.
But it was still a pro-life platform.
All right, we're going to jump to a break here. We're going to have a lot more here as RFL continues. We'll be going back to Tampa shortly, but we'll be talking about one Christie right after this.